Good afternoon, everyone. And first, I'd like to thank you for your patience standing out there in the heat. Thank you for coming in an orderly fashion, and we'll get underway shortly. Today's program will include a brief moderated Q&A session, followed by the book signing. We're going to do this logically and call you up by row. So the way you're seated will be the book signing, and we'll do it this way so you can get out quickly and easily. Sean Spicer has served as White House Press Secretary, Communications Director, as well as Republican National Committee Communications Director and Chief Strategist. He also worked for the United States Trade Representative and several members of Congress, a graduate of Portsmouth Abbey School, Rhode Island, Connecticut College, and the United States Naval War College. He is a commander in the United States Naval Reserve. Mr. Spicer is also the founder and president of Brickwill LLC, a strategic consulting firm for corporate and association executives, a frequent public speaker and commentator. He lives with his family in Alexandria, Virginia, but as we know, he is a Rhode Island native. Our moderator, Mr. Joe Paolino, is the former mayor of Providence and U.S. ambassador to Malta. He was previously the former director of the Rhode Island Department of Economic Development and currently serves as managing partner for Paolino Properties. So, without further ado,
thank you.
Paolino.
Hi, everyone. I have a lot of former titles, which don't mean much when they're former, right? But one of my present titles is I'm the Democratic National Committee man representing Rhode Island. So a lot of my friends on the extreme, my friends are the Democrats, what the hell are you doing with Sean Spicer? And I just shake my head and I say, you know, that's part of the problem in politics and in government today, that Democrats and Republicans don't talk together. You know, Sean, my uncle was Tom Paolino. He was on the Supreme Court in Rhode Island, and he was a Republican National Committee man. And he would tell me stories about when he ran against John Fogerty for Congress. They would be in the barbershop together, right next to each other. They would talk about what they're going to debate that night, and that they kept their friendships. And today is so, the polarization that I've seen is so bad. What I'm trying to do in my position is to tell Democrats we got to talk to Republicans if we want to move our country moving forward. If we want to do you need to communicate, and when you don't communicate, it's just like a husband and wife. When they don't communicate, what happens? They have domestic problems. So you've got to continue to have dialogue. Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan, Joe Paolino, Sean Spicer. So as much as I did all I could to see Donald Trump get defeated, and I was a strong Clinton supporter, I was so proud that when Sean Spicer, a kid that grew up in Barrington, because what a lot of people don't know is I grew up in Barrington. I grew up on Barton Avenue, next door to Stanley's Boatyard. And I would take my bicycle from Barton Avenue down to Ben Franklin. And at the Five and Dime, and I used to do shopping as a young boy. And when I was growing up, my dad would take me to school. I'd say, someday I want to be mayor of Barrington. Well, he said, Joe, there's no mayor of Barrington, so it's time to move to Providence. But I'm happy to be here at the Barrington Bookstore and to be with Sean Spicer. He's a quality guy, and I think all of us as Rhode Islanders, if we like his politics or don't like his politics, we got to be proud of the great success that he's had. And Sean, some of the questions, just a few questions. Working in the White House, I mean, did you like pinch yourself every day when you walked in there? Or did you slap yourself?
Well, first, I want to thank everybody for coming out. It's a Saturday in the summer. It's absolutely beautiful, so I don't know if the beach is shut. Thank you guys for sharing your day. It really is humbling sitting here and looking out at you guys and knowing that there's not something for sale or having this on sale here or something, that you came for the book. It means a lot to me, and I really appreciate that. Thanks to Barrington Books for making this possible. We're here in Cranston, and thanks to you, Joe, for doing this, because as you said, and I agree, I think we've gotten in a bad place in our country, and to the extent that I can afterwards help I joke with people that I think I'm a fairly fierce partisan, but I think we can be good people and have dialogues. We can learn from each other. I want to continue to advocate for the things that I believe in, but I respect the voices of people who either don't agree or have their own. And I think we need to be able to have those discussions in a civil and respectful way. And I don't think that's happened too often. You know, getting to the heart of your question, I remember when I left Barrington and I was moving down to Washington, all I wanted was to get a job on Capitol Hill. And I got a call from David Griswold, who was Senator Chafee's chief of staff, and he said, you know, you got this job, if you're interested, it's just like answering phones, and it pays $18,000 a year. My mom's only question was, does it have health benefits? and it did. They were tired of paying the health care bill. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I remember begging every day that I would stay after work, I would drive Senator Chafee around, and just because I thought it was so cool that I got to be this close to somebody that important. And my goal was always a few years later to come back to Rhode Island and be here. And I kind of caught the buck. I enjoyed it. I loved being in the debate. I know your show is called In the Arena. I felt like I was in the arena, and I felt, you know, you're going out there all the time and you were engaging in something and you were winning or losing every day. You run a campaign and you knew whether or not you were moving forward or backwards. And you know, all throughout my career, I kind of stumble forward a way where you do something, you get a phone call and say, hey, we like what you did there. Would you be willing to you know, work for this committee that we have? Would you be willing to work for this candidate? Kind of just taking it a notch up. In July of 2009, I got recalled in the Navy. Spent 18 months on active duty. When I got off, my wife and I were like, look, we're done with politics. Let's just go get a job in corporate America and kind of enjoy life a little bit. And I got a call. They said, there's this newly elected chairman of the RNC. He's from Wisconsin. He's looking to get somebody that has an understanding of the press corps in Washington, and would you be willing to meet with him? I said, sure. And normally when you sign up to go, you know, we hit it off. I thought, okay, this is the next 2 years working at the RNC. And he ran again for another 2 years and said, hey, will you stick around? I did. And then we had a lot of success in the midterms that year. And he said, you know what? Let's just do it one more term. And because we really want to do the presidential race, and we'd spent a lot of money building a ground game and an operation. It's all in the book about what we did to try to put our best foot forward politically. And we got 17 candidates running, and I had been the point person putting together the presidential debates on the Republican side. And you know, you've got Rubio and Bush, Cruz, Walker, and you know, I talk about meeting Trump for the first time, and I'm like, okay, like there's no organization there. You know, he has no experience in politics, and in so many cases, and Obama really showed how to use data and field operation in a way that nobody else had. And I'm like, everyone else was kind of trying to do that now. So you had Bush and Walker and Cruz all talking about putting together this amazing operation. And Trump was like, I'll just tweet. Like, I don't see how that works. And you know, so at the RNC, our job was to basically, I joke, it's like being the lead. Like, you're not trying to pick a winner or loser, what team wins or not. You know, you hope that the Red Sox win. But, you know, the commissioner of the league is supposed to be kind of neutral, and that's our job, was to basically make sure there's a level playing field and the voters decided. So, Trump wins. He's got no fundraising operation, no research operation, bare bones communications effort. And they start, I talked about this in August, I get a phone call, it's like, you got to start coming up to New York. We got to put a team together that, you know, can handle this. And the hit against us at all times was like, Hillary has 1,000 people in Brooklyn, she's crushing you guys. And we were just doing what we said we would do. We had the data out there, we talked about how the field operation was, you know, mirroring where the data told us to go. We felt really good, but you know, you read these stories every day that we were understaffed, we didn't have the operation that we needed to put, no one had ever done it this way before, you know, and our view was, well, who cares who's paying for the data in the field game, right? Whether it's out of the campaign, it's still hard dollars. Frankly, it's more effective to come out of the party side. I walked through all of this in great detail in the book, and so lo and behold, election night comes along and we win. And you know, and it wasn't just win. I mean, like, I had a model that got us to 271, and for those of you who are political geeks, you know that Maine and Nebraska both, you know, their electoral votes can be our by congressional district, and I was like, okay, we get to 272 if we win Maine's second district. That's about as high as I got us.
Did you think you'd win that day, that morning?
You've run before, and you know that no matter what you're running for, in your gut, you always think you're going to win, though. You, despite what the polls, you go, I know that I saw that event last night. People are going to get out there, and the polls are, and the data said that we had a shot. And I walked through this, that there was this subset of voters in every battleground state that we called the downshifters. They were people that said, I'm never going to vote for Hillary Clinton, but I'm uncomfortable voting for Trump. And we basically went out and targeted them and said, if you're given a binary choice between Clinton, we can get you in that voting booth, or we can get you to vote absentee or early, that you will vote for Trump, because there were committed Republicans who are high propensity voters, but just weren't comfortable with him yet. So our goal was to turn those people out. But that same demographic existed in almost every battleground state. And the early numbers that we had, you obviously never know how someone's going to vote, but the model showed that we got them out. And as we were monitoring election day, it was like, holy smokes, they're turning out. But more importantly, she wasn't living up to where she needed to be in the model. And so you're sitting there, fingers crossed. Remember, we won Michigan by 0.3. And so the margin of error, it's not big. And that was the difficult thing, is that we felt good, but until you saw those vote totals come in, you weren't sure.
I got to tell you a funny story. The Saturday before the election, a good friend of mine was in charge of Michigan for Hillary, and I called him up. And I said, if you don't win, are you going to win Michigan? I think we're doing well, lady. The horse stuff. And I said to him, well, I can tell you this, if you don't win this, you're going to be the biggest putz that ever if you don't. And he started laughing. I said, I'm laughing too, but I'm serious. You're going to win Michigan.
Yeah.
And he's still a putz.
So, look, growing up here, I never thought, I was just excited to get a job working for John Chafee. I still have he was a classy guy. And he taught me a lot about how to handle yourself. It was amazing the number of times when he'd walk up to a senator and just say, I can't be with you today. There was no flailing and putting out statements. It was just pure class. And I learned a lot from being able to tag along behind him. And but even, like I was saying, the trajectory of getting to the White House as press secretary was never through the RNC. It's just, or the DNC, frankly. That's, you play a supporting role. So in the back of my mind, I didn't think this was in the cards. And then we win, and you look around and you're like, there's not a lot of other people that were part of this and that had a relationship with it.
But when you were growing up in Barrington, I wasn't kidding what I was saying earlier when I was a little boy.
Yeah.
I really wanted to be, mayor of Providence. I was kidding when I said Barrington. But I really wanted to be mayor of Providence when I was a young kid. That's because I met Joe Dawley, and I liked him. And he was my dad's age. He had kids my age, and you have a connection. When you were growing up here in Barrington, did you want to get into politics?
No. My mom's in the back. She'll tell you. I sold everything. There's probably a lot of people in this room that I sold stuff to. I sold greeting cards. I love selling. I sharpened skis for people. I think I did a pretty good job. Any complaints, let me know. But I loved marketing and selling. And I think if I had to pick it would have been dumped something in the marketing field. I loved selling things and making money and trying to figure out how to make a buck. And in some ways, that's kind of in a different way, but similar to what politics is. You're going out and you're selling your ideas, your candidate, your cause. But that's, that was never in my bloodstream. We weren't politically active. And Barrington was, we have a town council that was never political. I don't know where it is today, but it was always, I had neighbors that were on the town council, and it was just, so public service really wasn't in the...
Until when?
I think late high school, I did my first internship. When I was at the Abbey, Portsmouth Abbey, I got an interest in it from one of the classes. And one of the teachers said, we had these 2-week breaks. And I said, I'd love to go to Washington. And a bunch of recent graduates from Portsmouth Abbey, going to Georgetown. And so I knew I'd have a place to stay. And one of my politics government teacher, Liv Hobbins, who's in the book, says, well, I'll tell you what, if you're interested in going down, I know George Mitchell of Maine's office manager. And I could set up a 1-week internship. And as someone who's worked on a Hill for, when subsequently, you don't do a ton
We could have had you as a Democrat.
See, you lost me. Blame Maine. But I went down and I loved it. It was, again, you're basically like, hey, go drop this off. Seal these envelopes. But there was this level of excitement that was so neat. Hustling back and forth and watching the interactions, and I was like, I want to come back and do this. And so I did a lot. I went to Connecticut College in New London, and I started volunteering in a couple campaigns. I worked in the Connecticut State House for a representative up there. I volunteered on a congressional campaign in the 2nd District, where they had a field office in New London, and just started to, do various different things that got me involved, and I liked it. It was fun. It was exciting. There was an exhilaration to it. And then I got a job, an actual paid job, as a field representative after I graduated to do the congressional race in the 2nd District in Connecticut. And that kind of, the bug got bitten. I moved down to Washington. Same thing, I was volunteering. Republicans had just taken over in 1994. And there was just such excitement. And I was like, this is what I like.
But George Mitchell was a Democrat. But seriously,
yeah.
How did you, first of all, were your mom and dad Republicans?
I don't think so. Putting her on the spot.
So you're now with George Mitchell, who's the majority leader of the Senate.
Yeah.
Classy guy,
yeah.
a very good senator. And he's a Democrat. So when you left there, did you say, I don't like these Democrats? Did you go in there as a Republican?
I don't think I knew what I was.
Right.
I liked being involved in being in the action, right? I didn't think I knew the difference that well. I mean, I honestly, at one point, I think a professor, like in high school, one of the teachers in high school said GOP, and I was like, just nodded my head. This is, pre-internet, you can't just go Google it. I was like, what's the GOP? I'm like, I thought I was a Republican. I didn't realize the moniker and the history of the party. I understood, I think, that the basic principles. But when you're working for George Mitchell as a 17-year-old intern, you're not exactly making big policy decisions. It was literally like, take these envelopes to that office, go get this signature, seal this, and you're among other young, ambitious kids who are all kind of in the same boat. They're just looking for exposure and experience. And I talk about in the book, and you and I have talked about this a little bit. I remember my dad swam boats for a living. Speaking of Barton Ave, I cleaned boats down at Stanley Boat Yard and Booster Boats. I mean, I scrubbed a lot of the boats, I sanded a lot of teak, and polished a lot, and Rhode Island passed, the Congress passed a luxury tax in 1992, and it just wiped out the industry here in Rhode Island. And suddenly, you're seeing the real impact that policies have, and that's, when I look back, that probably is the most defining moment for me in my sort of ideological conversion.
Is the luxury tax on boats in 1992.
Right. Just knowing what it did to working men and women in Rhode Island and watching industry go away because,
92 or 93?
I was somewhere in there.
Well, you may have had a Democratic Congress in 92, but you had George Bush, number one, was president, so he could have signed that into law.
Right. But you remember there was that grand bargain.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, the point is that I saw the impact that policies had. You were taxing this group of folks, seemingly to bring in more money to the government, and yet, at least here in Rhode Island, the consequences were deeply felt by working men. And I know, just so we're clear, Joe was a big champion when he was at the Rhode Island Economic Development Council.
Well, it was because of the luxury tax. What happened, Governor Sullivan was in office, and I was at Economic Development, and the boating lobby came to see me, and they said, with what happened in Washington, we'd like to take the sales tax off of the sale of boats in Rhode Island, no matter if they're used or new. And we got it passed by the legislature, the governor signed it, and that law is still on the books today. And we did it for the boat building industry. But because of what happened in Washington is what initiated the movement.
So you kind of are like a sort of a Republican.
But I see Halsey Hershef here, that's my friend. We served together in League of Cities and Towns, and I have a great deal of admiration and respect. I never looked at him as a Republican, and I don't think he looked at me as a Democrat. We were doing the work of our communities.
Absolutely right. We look at each other as partners in government.
Absolutely, and that's what they have to do. But let me ask you, you work for Trump, you're there, short term, 6 months, they bring on this Scaramucci, didn't sound like it was a spaghetti sauce, right? You're saying, this guy's not going to tell me what to do, I know this business inside out. You said, I'm going to hang it up. Did you then say to yourself, I got to write a book about these experiences? And why did you want to write the book? I mean, I know you want to make a buck.
I know you want to tax it.
Last time I checked, you guys control But I mean, you know, in the arena, I could use a second co-host.
I'll come up just for the summer. I left the White House in September 1st was officially my last day. And I spent a lot of time on the road speaking to groups and organizations. And it was a really a lot of great opportunities. And people have told me, if you write a book, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of dedication, and you kind of got to put a lot of things on hold. I was like, okay. And what happened was, I'd go to these groups and organizations, and I'd be doing these speaking events, and literally the same questions would come up over and over again about me, my background, what it was like to work in the White House, what was happening behind the scenes, and a couple things. But the second thing was, people would say, well, I read that you felt the following. And I was like, okay, so now it's like left up to all these other people to talk about how I felt. And I was like, finally I called my agent back up in December, and I said, do you think that there's still an audience for a book? And he said, let's meet with the publishers. So we brought him up, sat down with 12 different publishers, sat there, one after another. I said, this is what I want to write. I want to tell people about who I am, how I get from Barrington, Rhode Island to the White House, and I want to tell them what was really going on behind all of these critical moments in the last few years. And some of them said, like, will you go after this person or that? And I was like, nope, that's not who I am. And then some of them were like, well, here are the contours. And then there was a group of them, 3 of them, I think, that said, we're really interested, let's talk. And finally, the last publisher I met with is the one that I went with. And I told my story. I said, this is what I want to do, exactly what I just laid out. And they were like, okay, we like it. They called back and said, here's the deal we want to put together. And I just said, you know what? That's who I want to be with.
Did you go through, when you left the White House, you were going, you probably sleeping 2-3 hours a night if you were lucky. And you're going around the clock, and he's an active guy. And, sometimes I'm sure the Twitter account, did it ever go down to the White House? Was there ever did the Wi-Fi ever break down once in a while?
The White House military folks make sure that doesn't happen.
But did you go through withdrawal a little bit of, now you're not going 100 miles an hour. Everything just stops.
Yeah, it took a while because you literally are used to clutching, and you can see I haven't even looked at it once. It takes a while, but I had 2 phones. You're constantly looking at them. You're not engaging with people in a real and a substantive way because you're having to check emails and texts, etc., or tweets. And it takes a while to get that out of your system. And it's still not entirely. It's a little bit of in my DNA. But between my wife and my mom, they put the phone down.
I heard in one of the interviews you said you wouldn't want to work in the White House again.
Right.
But if the right person got elected.
No, it's an honor and a privilege. I'm glad I did it. It really is amazing to stop, to your first question, and pinch yourself and go, this is unbelievable that I do this. There's a picture in the book that I took intentionally, which is when I walked out the last day, I turned around and I looked at the gate and I just took a picture of it. So when that gate closes, you can't walk back in. It's a very heavy moment. But knowing what I know now, I'm glad I did it. It's an honor, and I say this Republican, Democrat, to go into that White House and serve any president of the United States is an honor. And I think, but knowing what the toll that it took on, the intensity, what it took on my family, we're a great country with a lot of talented people, somebody else should have a turn.
What's your next act?
There's hopefully a lot of them. We're going to spend the next 2 months on the road and wanted to be here to kick it off. But then I've got a podcast that I've done, continue to do a lot of speaking. As was mentioned at the outset, I've got a firm that does some strategic consulting with C-suite level folks. I've got a couple of entertainment projects.
Do you get paid to speak when you go to these things?
Yes.
You get this for nothing.
There's a book. I am a Republican, Joe.
Sean, any advice for the young people who want to make a profit from corroding the truth?
Great question. Excellent question.
I think that if young people should engage.
There you go. I always liked you more than Sarah.
I'll take it. So she's a great person.
Is she going to be leaving that?
Look, I think that everybody who's there, the advice that I've given to the executive and task is, look, you go 1,000,000 miles an hour, and under this president probably 1,000,005. And if you can't maintain the stamina and the intensity, which, well, I mean, it's just, there's a reason they average tenures like 18 months.
You get burned out.
Get burned out. I think that there's always natural causes. Elections are one. So after the midterm, I think anyone serving in a senior position to the president should reflect on whether they and their family are willing to continue to do that. And, personally, I have a hard time thinking a lot of these guys can. It's just, it's very emotionally and mentally draining to maintain that pace. But
the one guy that does it though is Trump.
Right.
And he's got, he said he's got the, I don't like the guy, but I respect him. He's not stupid. He's got pretty good instincts. I don't like his judgment, but boy, he has a stamina. He does not stop.
And you gotta have a staff that keeps up with him. So, I think that it's good for that process to take place, for people to kind of come in and refresh, because it's just
You need new ideas and energy.
Correct. You ready to sign some books?
No
Thank you.
Questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to put that off.
I'm done. Your show.
I'm curious, but thank you for your service to this country. I mean,
That's right.
I'm curious as to whether you ever had a relationship or bonded or had an opportunity to talk to Melissa McCarthy.
Thank you. I have not. I've met her, and I say this, someone that knows me says, you remember back in, that was 2 or 3 years ago, there was a Time 100 dinner in New York that I was staffing someone at, and apparently we shake hands, but not since the White House. I've never had a conversation with her. Yes, sir.
Your job was, as press secretary along with communications director, was to control public discourse emanating from the White House.
Yeah.
How did you find that with the president up all night tweeting, sending out inflammatory tweets, how did you feel like you could control that discourse when he's tweeting at times pretty outrageous things that can be dangerous? And so how do you feel like you were able to control that, or if you were able to at all?
I don't think I controlled it at all. And I don't think, and what's interesting is, I spent a career where you had people that you worked for or advised, and your job was to come up and say, this is the message, this is how I think we should approach this, these are the top lines, these are the tactics that we're going to utilize. And they would edit, sign off, modify, whatever. With Trump, it was literally the inverse, which is that he led the charge, he did it, and then he was like, follow behind and amplify. But he found success in business and as a candidate with a tactic and approach that he believes is successful. Now, does he take input? Yes. Does he listen to people? Yes. But ultimately, he's going to say, thank you, this is how I want it done, this is how we're going forward, and that's it. And
Do you think that's dangerous?
It's how he is, and that's how he was elected, and that's what he wants to, he feels as though it's been successful for him, and that's how, so from my perspective, to your point, there wasn't a degree of control. It was, this is how we're going to operate, and you're going to adapt and amplify that for me. Yes, ma'am. I'll go to you and then straight.
Trump has endless amount of energy, and I wonder, what does he average for sleep? It seems like he's always on the go. He's
I don't,
like 2 or 3 hours a night, or?
it's probably somewhere between 4 and 5.
Yeah.
Just say that between, you know, how many texts I get or tweets that I saw before when I woke up. When did you have time to do that?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I haven't looked at your book, followed what's happening in this country, and I'm very political. And an organization that I'm president of that's very nonpartisan. And our question always seems to be, I was at a conference just recently with 1,000 of our members in Chicago, and women are very, very nervous about what's happening in the White House now, and very upset about how truth is being twisted. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think that we're a divided country right now. You look at the president's approval rating, it frankly ticked up last week, according to NBC Wall Street Journal. And so there's two things. I think, and Joe and I were talking about this a minute ago, I think that we've gotten past the point where we've realized that we can disagree, but that we can still respect the other side. And that's where I hope that we can get back to, which is, I hear a lot of times, if you guys don't X, like there's this assumption that the views and beliefs of people that you don't agree with are false and not credible, right? And frankly, as a conservative, and in the book I talk about this. I mean, I went to Connecticut College, which has like 3 Republicans, and I'm not really sure that that's true either. But a lot of times, as a young conservative, I felt that we were, shouted down, kept out of discussions, and so it's part of what we've gotten to is not recognizing that there's another side to a lot of these discussions, that clearly 45% of the country does agree with the president right now. You can pick your poll. So some people, that's only 40. Okay, fine. 41, 45, who cares? But a good amount of the country, and frankly, part in a very, very committed way. So, but there's also then, probably 45 that really don't like him, and then a swath in between that go back and forth. That's fine. But the question is, does the first 45 respect the other 45 and vice versa? And I think, unfortunately, the answer right now is in many cases no. What I think we need to get back to is instead of making accusations about, well, your beliefs don't matter, or I can't believe you guys, and this is true of a lot of Trump supporters. They go, the idea that you support that man makes you, and then fill in the blank. Really? I mean, and I think that, that's part of the problem. I don't think that if you support Hillary Clinton, you're a bad person. You believe in certain things and you like her as a candidate. I may disagree with you vehemently and have a lot of reasons why I don't support her or want to vote for her, but I don't think you're a bad person. And I think, unfortunately, we see this too often right now, where it's like, if you vote for Trump or you're openly expressing it, it becomes a fill-in-the-blank of what you are. I mean, and that's where I think that's interesting that the dialogue is happening right now. It's as everyone talks about how bad the discourse is, except for when they talk about how they think of the other side as well. So I just think that we've got to get back to a point where we can disagree with someone and say, I understand that I don't agree with who you're supporting or why, but clearly there's a good chunk of people in this country that do support them.
I think the First Amendment and truth are very important. Press.
I think the First Amendment is
what our Constitution says and what we're hearing, and I'm not saying on just one side, but mostly, perhaps I could say, I think we better start thinking about our Constitution and free press.
I am a big supporter, and I talk about that very clearly in the book. Yes, sir.
Sean, first of all, I want to say I knew your father very well. I was in a business organization with him, and I could see why you're such a terrific individual, because he was a wonderful human being, and it was a great loss when we lost him a while ago. So what a terrific man. Michael was just amazing.
Sean,
So
if we don't start the signing, we're going to have a lot of disappointment.
Okay.
my question was,
I'll wrap up
in the 60s, Johnson was responsible for a lot of the family destruction in this country. Could that be turned around? Because that's where a lot of the crux started. If you're really a student of history, in 1967, President Johnson was one of the catalysts in destroying the family unit. especially in the minority, I hate that word because everyone is not a minority, but in that population, especially with the welfare, he destroyed the family unit for lots of reasons. Could that be turned around? Because I'd like to see our president today turn that around.
Well, to kind of follow on the question I just answered, I think instead of necessarily trying to figure out who to blame where everything started,
Like I said.
and I know that's not your intention, but I think
Exactly.
what happens is a lot of people, when we have a conversation like this, feel like, you know, if you're assigning blame, then it makes it very hard to have a constructive conversation about how to move forward. So, first, thank you very much for your kind words about my father. I appreciate that. Secondly, you know, so my point is, I think that the way that we can move forward is by trying to say, okay, let's not figure out who started it, when to blame. It's saying, okay, what do we want to do to go forward? What are the policies? And then let's mobilize and go out there. And if you have a problem with Trump, then go organize. Get out there, vote for candidates. But that's where we as a society and as a country settle our differences. Support causes that, you know, if you're interested in particular aspects that you think rebuild the family, you know, volunteer, organize, and financially support organizations that further those causes. But we have a great country that allows us to get organized in so many different ways to support things and candidates and issues and causes that we believe in. Thank you guys for coming out. Excited.